Hello and welcome to episode 344 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert. As always, Damien Fay and me, Andy Leaks. Damien, welcome back. We're back to normal this week. We've done our specials and it's nice to see your face again. How are you doing?
Yeah, because people won't realise that Andy and I didn't see each other in a period of those specials because we recorded them as like one job lot, basically, at the beginning 2 weeks ago to be able to split them out because each of us and quite a few people on the Money to the Masses team took time off over the half-term period. So that just lets you behind the curtain how we sometimes do things. And on that, it is worth following us on Instagram and Twitter and things like that because Andy and I just recorded a short piece that went on our Instagram story showing you how we record this podcast in terms of the equipment, microphone and that kind of thing, how we do it, because I think a lot of people out there would be quite interested in starting podcasting, and the equipment we use is not expensive and really accessible to anybody. So if you're interested in that, do have a look at our Instagram feed. Hopefully it will still be on there. It might not be given it's Sunday, but maybe if you want me to, I can post it up as a permanent post. But yeah, it's good to be back, Andy. And I think it's nice to see we've had some more reviews. I'm going to read one out quickly before we start the podcast. That was from Julie at the weekend saying, definitely worth a listen. A light and engaging way to learn all the key things you need to know about finance. I've been listening for a few years now. You won't regret listening. Keep up the good work, guys. So that was really nice to read. And Julie, get in touch. We'll send you our Money to the Masses mug as well. We're feeling very generous. And if you haven't left us a review, or even if you have, technically you can leave more than one, then do go on and leave us a review on whatever app you're using to listen to this podcast. Please do leave us a review. Very easy to do. And I just wanted to mention one other message I had, which I say to people that it's motivating receiving messages, but I just want to illustrate how much it is, because 80/20 Investor members will get emails from us and research pieces. And every month we do a review of the best funds, which is a short list of funds that have momentum in them, and that tends to go out quite late in the day because the analysis has to be done. And I was working quite late in the office, and Jeff, I'm not going to read out Jeff's surname, but Jeff wrote to me and just said, just a note of kudos to you. You seem to send these messages and others at such unsociable hours, because I just sent an email out announcing what the new shortlist was, and he put, I hope it doesn't mean you're working these unsociable hours, but knowing you probably are. Well done, it's appreciated, thank you for what you do. But the reason I'm reading it out, I know lots of people work long unsociable hours, but it's just nice to receive a note because it is motivating, especially when you're there like 10, 11 o'clock at night and you haven't seen the kids and stuff like that. It was really nice to receive that message. So I wanted to say a personal thank you to Jeff for sending that in, because it did give me a bit of a buzz.
Okay, so yeah, thanks, Jeff. And if you want to send any sort of messages across, whether it's feedback, positive, negative, always send it across, because we look at it, we act on it, we share it amongst the team. And it is, as Damien says, highly motivating for us. So let's move on to what's coming up on this week's pod. What have we got?
So there are three pieces as usual. I'm going to talk about green bonds. So the National Savings and Investments have launched a green bond. So a bond is a savings product which locks you in for a period of time that should give you a better interest rate, and it is an ethical product. So basically you'll be doing something positive with your money. It's been talked about for quite some time that it was going to come. It's finally been launched. So I want to tell people about it and whether it's any good. We're also going to talk about legal tender. Now, this is something interesting that appeared in the news about somebody trying to pay for something with £100 coin. But I actually want to take the story on from what was printed in the press and actually work out what is legal tender. What can you pay for products with? And I want to dispel one or two myths. And the other piece is one that you're going to do, Andy, which is quite a meaty piece on business bank accounts.
Yeah, and actually, Damien, why don't we start off with this piece? So yeah, business bank accounts. We've covered bits and pieces about business bank accounts before, but we've never really delved into it deeply. So what we're going to look at today is what business bank accounts are out there, what type of business bank accounts can you get, and taking it one step further as well and look at business savings accounts, because once you've got your business up and running and cash flows coming in, it'll be nice to know exactly what you can do with some of that cash. And there are some alternative options. So should we crack straight on with it?
Yeah, so let's go on with that, because this will be interesting to people who maybe are starting a business, but also people who already have a business.
Yeah, and so the first thing really is to work out whether you actually need a business bank account. So it's worth just clarifying exactly who needs to get one. So if you're a limited company and you're registered with Companies House, you probably know this already if you've gone through that process, but you are legally required to have a business bank account. That is one that's separate from your personal affairs. You need to do that legally. If you are a freelancer or a sole trader, there's not necessarily any legal requirement, depending on your company setup, to open a business bank account, but many people prefer to do it because it means they can easily keep things separate. And as we'll go on to in a minute, there is a really easy way that you can flip from your personal to your business account if you bank with certain banks, because you can do it through the app. So that's who needs to get it. The next decision really is trying to work out what type of business bank account suits your business. Now, when I say type, really they fall into two main types. You've got the new style, what I would call app-only business bank accounts. And they're called that because they don't have a presence on the high street. They're new names, and you've probably heard of them already because they are out there and they're doing very well. People like Monzo, Starling, Revolut, these are the companies that you can do business banking with online, again, primarily through an app. Or you've got a choice of going more mainstream and choosing a high street bank. And again, these are names you heard of: NatWest, Lloyds, HSBC. And again, we'll go on to the pros and cons of which ones you would choose and why in just a second. Okay, so let's start with the app-only business bank accounts. Now, we've done a full article on this on the website. Lauren's done a great job in delving down into each individual bank, and you can read that full article to see all the pros and cons. And we'll put a link to that article in the show notes as always, and that's on the podcast app that you use. You should be able to see that in the text, but also on the article itself. Okay, so let's start with the online app-only business bank accounts. There are a few really good ones out there that are very, very cheap. And this is again why a lot of new businesses might want to go down the app-only business banking route, because it is a cheaper way of banking. Again, I'll explain why when we move on to the high street banks, because we will cover charges in just a second. So the ones we really like are Starling, Monzo, Revolut, Tide, and Monese. And again, you can go onto the article where we provide a really helpful table that will put all of these app-only banks side by side, include the costs, why we like them, whether you can do free UK transfers, overdrafts, loans, deposit checks. All of that is on the site itself. And so the main reason that people may want to use these app-only banks is because for the majority of them, there are no monthly fees. And by that, I mean that you're not going to be charged an actual amount per month just solely for access to that account. They're completely free. And that is for Starling, Monzo, Revolut, and Tide. There are no monthly fees at all. Another reason people might want to use these is a lot of these accounts come with fee-free spending when you're abroad, and you can actually transact in multiple currencies. And again, when you've got an app that you can do this with, and if you are doing transactions abroad, it makes things super simple and super quick. Next, we're going to move on to high street banks and why you might want to use that for your business. Firstly, a high street bank is something that's been established. It's well established. It's protected by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. Again, a lot of the app-only banks are as well, but people might want to choose a bigger name just for that extra assurance. But where people with businesses might prefer a high street bank is for access to funds, because where app-only banks struggle is none of them currently offer any overdraft facilities for businesses or business loans. Now, that may change over time, of course, but the high street banks is where access to those funds is a lot easier, especially if you've been banking with them on a personal basis for many years. They know you as a customer and you can prove who you are and what you're trying to do with your business. It's much easier to get access to a business loan and a business overdraft. And again, Lauren highlights 5 top high street business bank accounts on the article. We cover Virgin Money, HSBC, NatWest, Lloyds, and Santander. And out of all of those, all of them provide business overdrafts, and HSBC, NatWest, and Lloyds Bank will provide business loans as well. Another thing to consider a high street bank is for ease of use, really. Things like cashing and depositing checks. If your business uses cash and you need to be able to get that cash to the bank, again, it's going to be much easier for you to do that through a high street bank. App-only banks do have the facility to be able to deposit cash, but sometimes you need to go into a post office to do it, and sometimes there are charges associated with that as well. So you just need to weigh up what is best for your business. Are you going to go down the easier route because you've got access to your phone on an app-only business bank, or is your business doing okay? You're not worried about paying a small monthly fee. You're not worried about paying the odd transaction fee, and you want to be able to access a high street bank and have that security, then of course go down that route.
So if I chuck in my two pennies worth on this topic, now there is a sense that if you are creating a brand new business, that you're doing something that's quite small, it's like a hobby, you're going to turn into a business, there is a trend for people to move towards the app-only banks, because a number of them actually do offer some incentives within the sign-on process where they might give you access to some free accounting software and things like that. So those things are neatly packaged up. And so going back to Andy's point, it can be very easy to sign up, it's very slick, and you're up and running very quickly. And because they are very much technology based, they tend to integrate quite well with technology solutions. The one thing that happened in the pandemic, which is quite interesting, is that the robustness of the app-only banks was tested quite severely. So if you go back and if you recall, there was a period where obviously lots of businesses started to struggle because the economy was locked down, and then there were emergency loans that were backstopped by the government, but they were implemented through your business banks. So where a number of app-only banks, and Starling is one of the ones that they did have some issues, and customers did start kicking up a bit of a fuss, they weren't getting access to some of those loans as quickly as they wanted to. And it was partly because of the way that Starling was implementing it, which they said, if you go and read the PR around it, they said they were doing more stringent checks, etc., and being responsible. But fundamentally, when you were with some of the high street banks, it was a very smooth, easy process if you wanted to get these loans from the government to support your business. The money was hitting the business accounts very quickly, but with some of the app-only banks, that was taking longer, and there were people who were making complaints about the fact how it was impacting their business. So that is one of the pros and cons, again, of the two different choices. And it was only in a time of absolute stress that sort of thing comes to the fore. So something to bear in mind if we ever go back into a period of absolute stress, that some of maybe the newcomers to the market might not necessarily behave or be able to respond in the same timely fashion as some of the high street banks. But of course, as Andy's really done and explained, there are some big plus points to the app-only banks. But it's horses for courses. You need to make that choice yourself.
That's right. And so moving on to the next stage, really, let's assume that you've done all of that searching around, you've found a bank that suits your business. What do you then do as your business grows and you get more cash flow, more money flowing into the business that you don't necessarily need access to? I mean, it's a perfect scenario, something people would dream of, but obviously it happens with successful businesses. What do you do with that money? Because obviously in your personal life, you would put your money into things like ISAs and investments and savings accounts. What do you do as a business? Well, you can do exactly the same thing. You can look for business savings accounts, and there's many out there, and they effectively fall into three different types of category. You've got easy access savings accounts for businesses. You can choose to go for a fixed rate business savings account, and there's also something called a notice business savings account, or a notice account. So let's quickly look into the kind of interest you could expect to receive on those different types of savings accounts and whether it would work for your business. Again, check out the article that Lauren's done. We update it regularly with all of the best rates, with all of the best savings rates for your business. In terms of easy access, you're obviously going to get a slightly lower rate. The reason being, you're not committing to anything. You're just putting your money into that account. It will earn the interest while it's sitting in that account, and you can gain access to that at any point. And the rate you'll get on that, roughly at the moment, the best rate out there is 0.55%. So it's not to be sniffed at. It's better than sitting in an account earning nothing, but it's not the best. And the top 5 rates at the moment range from 0.55% down to 0.30%. Again, perfect if you want to just put the money in there and you need access to it. If you're in a slightly luckier position where you've don't need access to that money for a certain period of time, you can lock that money away into something called a fixed rate bond. And they do that for business accounts as well. There are various different types of bonds that you can buy, i.e. the period in which you want to lock that money away for. And they generally range from 1 year up to 5 years. And the best rate that you can achieve at the moment on a 5-year fixed term deposit, a fixed rate bond, is 1.81%. So, I mean, you're looking at nearly 4 times what you can get on an easy access savings account. So, looking at the other end then, on a 1-year fixed bond, it's still pretty decent. You can get 1.16% interest at the moment. And so anywhere between 1 and 5 years, you're going to be sliding up the scale between 1% and 1.8%. So not bad at all. One thing you need to look for there is the minimum opening balance. Some of these bonds do require a guaranteed amount going in at the start. And that's anywhere between sort of 1,000 generally up to sort of 10 or 20,000. So it's a bit more than you would expect on a personal savings account. Sometimes on bonds, you can get anything from sort of 50 to £100. Business bank accounts, that sort of steps up a little bit more. And the other type of savings account that you can open up as a business is a notice account. Very similar to fixed rate bonds in that you need to lock it away for a certain period of time. You effectively need to give notice in order to access your money. So the money can stay there for as long as you like and it will earn the rate that you lock in. But if you need access to that, then you need to give the necessary notice. And the notice you'll need to give on these notice savings accounts generally starts at around 30 days, so around a month, up to around about 4 to 6 months, sort of 120, 180 days. That's the kind of period that you're locking this money away for. And the top 5 notice accounts at the moment are ranging somewhere between 0.75% to 0.9% interest.
So one of the big takeaways from this part of the podcast before we move on is that if you are running a business, then you should be putting aside your VAT or your potential corporation tax into an account. You need to be doing that. The taxman always wants his money. So the money coming into your business, you should be setting that aside. But when you do, you can actually earn money on that, which effectively, if you're using business savings accounts, even though it isn't a lot at the moment, can mean that your overall banking is free because it can offset the cost of your business banking when it comes to your business current account. So it's something to bear in mind. There is also the possibility of investing money that you have for your business, which is something we can cover in a future podcast if people are interested. I don't want to go too niche, but you can invest money that you have within a business to try and actually earn more than just a very low interest rate. But of course, the other thing, just to throw out there, when you are looking at these business savings accounts, some of them are operated online, others are a bit archaic. You have to do it by post or in branch, that kind of thing. So that will be one of your criteria by which you will probably also choose which one is most suitable for you and your business.
Okay, so let's move on then. And I've covered bonds there in the last section. We're going to be talking about bonds again. So green bonds, Damien, what are they? And are they as good as people had hoped?
So the green savings bonds are a savings product that are now available, have just become available from National Savings and Investments, so NS&I. So they're the government-backed savings entity that produces things like premium bonds. So they're giving people the chance to invest in the UK government's projects to fight climate change, which is very topical at the moment, given the UN climate conference that's going on in Scotland. Now, this product was hotly anticipated because it had been announced by the government previously that it was coming. And basically, the green savings bonds are specifically designed to put any money invested in them towards the government's chosen green project. So the tagline is that the money is going to be used to make the world greener, cleaner and more sustainable. But the sort of thing it will be invested in is perhaps things like zero emission buses, wind power and hydrogen research programs, carbon capture and storage, decarbonisation of hospitals and public buildings, all these kind of things, which is attractive to people who want to make their finances greener, which is a real movement at the moment that we're seeing at Money to the Masses as well. And it's hoped that the green savings bond will help the government reach a target which is now written into law to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. So what are these bonds actually like from a saver's point of view? Well, you can put between £100 and £100,000 into one of these, and there are 3-year fixed term products. So going back to what Andy was describing in the last piece, if you put your money in, it's in there for 3 years. You won't be able to get access to it if you want to be able to get all the interest. But this is where the excitement gives way to disappointment, because the rate of interest you will get is 0.65% per year. Now, that is guaranteed, and of course, it is backed by the government. So if the worst came to the worst, we have a financial crisis, you're not going to lose your money as you would if a bank went bust. And obviously, there's the Financial Services Compensation Scheme limit. But if you'd put in £100,000 into a bank's product, then you would lose some of your money. So why do I say it's disappointing? Well, if you look at the wider market and the best 3-year fixed rate bonds that are out there, then currently you can get between 1.65% and 1.81%. So that's 2 to 3 times the interest rate available on the NS&I green savings bonds. So whether these will take off, I have my doubts. So the message then for people is that this is an interesting product if you really want to be green, but you're not going to get the best rate of return. Now, if you are a saver who wants to try and make more interest on their money without locking it away necessarily, or all of it away for a long period of time, then do go back to episode 277 of this podcast when I talked about building a cash ladder. And that will prove very interesting because it's a technique where you lock away chunks of your money over time to be able to get a better rate of return than if you just had it in instant access. And of course, the other alternative for people is that you could look at ethical bank accounts, and there are ethical savings accounts, but again, the rates aren't as good as some of the rates that are out there on the Best Buy tables. Don't forget, Money to the Masses has Best Buy tables, which we can link to in the show notes, but if you go onto the Money to the Masses website, they're updated weekly. You can then just go to the savings section or just search for it in the search function, and you can get better rates in the wider market, which aren't technically ethical. But there are ethical banks. Some people will be wanting to invest ethically or save ethically. And there are banks like Triodos that are ethical banks. And at the moment, they have a 1-year fixed rate bond offering 0.4%, which is not too far from what the NS&I offering for over a 3-year period. So you could theoretically combine the cash ladder idea, go back and listen to that podcast, with some ethical bonds from some ethical banks to at least make your savings more green, more ethical, but not giving up all that interest rate potential. So it's quite a nice idea there. And the other thing just to mention before we finish on this piece is that Triodos, for example, do also do charity and corporate bank accounts. So again, if you've got a company or a business, linking back to the last piece on the podcast, you could save and bank ethically through your business, even if you weren't doing it personally. So that might appeal to some people.
Okay, so moving on to the final piece of the pod then, and we're going to be talking about legal tender, because there was a story that came up and it just got you thinking, Damien, and you did a bit more digging, didn't you?
Yeah, so the very short highlights of the story. Basically, there was a guy who went to buy petrol, and he then went to pay for that petrol, and he tried to use a commemorative £100 coin, and the petrol station wouldn't accept it. And as a result of rejecting their payment, they claimed that the guy basically had stolen the petrol. He then had a policeman come and knock on his door to challenge him, and ultimately the police had to issue him an apology because the £100 coin he was trying to use was technically legal tender, and he wasn't trying to steal petrol. So it's an interesting story from two parts about the fact that, well, the police had to apologise to him and he hadn't actually done anything wrong, but really raised the questions of what is legal tender. I didn't even know there was a £100 coin. I don't know if you did, Andy. Did you?
No, I knew I knew there were 5 and 10. I think my dad's got a 5 and a 10, but I hadn't heard of 100.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to explore really what the legal position is on various things of what is legal tender. Can shops refuse to accept your money, or do they have to take it if you're going to pay with cash? And I'm even going to talk about the fact that stamps are legal tender, or whether that's actually true. Because if, like me, you've heard that line before that yes, you could even get on a bus and pay with stamps, they're technically legal tender, then I'm going to actually explain whether that's true or not. So one of the interesting things about what is legal tender, when looking into it, there were facts that I didn't even know. So this is the sort of thing you're going to bore your friends with after you've listened to this podcast. Did you know? And according to the Royal Mint website, in England and Wales, then the £5, £10, £20 and £50 notes are legal tender for payment of any amount. But of course, they aren't legal tender in Scotland and Northern Ireland. But where this gets interesting is coins. Now, coins are legal tender throughout the country, and the £100 coin like that gentleman had is legal tender for any amount. And as is the £50 coin, the £20 coin, and the £5 coin that you mentioned. The £2 coin is for any amount, as is the £1 coin. But where it gets interesting is for denominations below £1, because I didn't know that the 50p is only legal tender for any amount not exceeding £10. So if you try to pay for something that's £20 in 50p coins, that is technically not legal tender. Now, what does it mean to be legal tender? And that's the difficult part, because the definition of what makes legal tender is that it means that if you have a court-awarded debt against you and they try to settle it paying in legal tender, then you can't refuse it. But that is kind of about it in terms of the definition. It's very vague and it has a very kind of narrow technical meaning to do with debts, but it has no real use in everyday life. So you can see where the confusion comes along when people are saying, well, I should be able to pay for anything in my 50p's that they've saved up in their coin jar because it's legal tender. And it's kind of a grey area, but these are the rules that are on the Royal Mint website. So like I said, it's legal tender to pay for anything not exceeding £10 in value with 50p coins. With 20p coins, again, it's not legal tender for any amount exceeding £10. For 10p coins, it's legal tender for any amount not exceeding £5. For 5p coins, it's legal tender for any amount not exceeding £5. For 2p coins, it's legal tender for any amount not exceeding 20p. And it's the same rule for pennies as well, so 1p coins. So I didn't know that. Did you know that, Andy?
I had no idea. I mean, that 2p legal tender for anything not exceeding 20p, I mean, that's quite a low amount. I mean, that's 10 coins. You can't basically pay legally over 10 coins in 2p's for a product. That's crazy to me.
So where this gets confusing is obviously you go into a shop, and we've all done it. I've paid for things valued more than 20p in 2p's when you've raided the old coin jar when you've run out of money at the end of the month. But shops are free to accept coins of any amount if they want to as payment for services or goods. And I suppose this then leads on to the next question about accepting cash at all. So the pandemic came along, and obviously the pandemic, we saw a mass movement towards a cashless society because people didn't want to handle cash because of the coronavirus. And so the question is, do shops have to accept cash? Are they allowed to say it's card only? Well, they are allowed to say it's card only as long as it's not discriminatory for race or disability or something else. So they don't have to take your money if they don't want to, as long as they're not discriminating. So that is a direction of travel we are heading. I don't necessarily like it because I think it does exclude a significant portion of the population who still just use cash. And I suppose that leads on to the final question that I mentioned at the start of the piece. What about stamps? Are stamps legal tender? Can you get on the bus, as my old teacher told me, and pay for your bus fare in stamps? Well, the answer is no. So legal tender does have that rather weird specific meaning that doesn't have much sort of use in today's society, but they don't have to accept stamps. It's not legal tender, and I've actually found that on the Royal Mail website as well. So if someone tells you can go pay for something in stamps, then from all my research, that technically isn't true.
Yeah, and I suppose that, mate, I've heard that as well, Damien, by the way. I've been told that all my life, that a bus driver has to take stamps. I don't know why a bus driver's getting all the flack here, but I thinking about it, and I don't know if this is true or not, but stamps used to have values on, didn't they? So I suppose they're a fixed price, whereas now they don't have values and the price goes up. So maybe that's part of the reason for maybe it changed. I don't know. Right, we're done for this week. If you want to get in touch with Damien, you can do so in the usual way. It's Damien at moneytothemasses.com. Twitter, it's at moneytothemasses with the number 2. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and we have the Facebook group as well, facebook.com/groups patreon.com/money to the masses if you've got any questions or feedback. And so that's it. We're done. Until next time.
Until next time.
Whoa.